Welcome back to the Storer's Edge podcast, where we explore the cutting edge of renewable energy, sustainability, and the entrepreneurs who are reshaping our world for the better. I'm Stuart Storrer, your host, and today I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Vina Lustado, the founder of Haus Design, calling in from beautiful Ojai, California. Hi, Vina.
Hi, Stuart. How are you?
I'm really good, thank you. So, Vina, you describe yourself as a social entrepreneur, a nature enthusiast, and a tiny home dweller. And I know you've been walking the walk for over a decade. Everybody, Vina earned an architecture degree from the USC with hopes of making a difference in the way people live. And she's certainly done that. In 2010, she founded Haus Design, her company. And in 2012, she built and designed her own tiny home on wheels, a humble 140-foot square space that she lived in full time for nearly a decade and completely off grid. So we'll find out a little bit more about that, I'm sure, in a second. In fact, I think we can probably see that behind you, Vina, can't we? Your house and your office. So what's remarkable is that her tiny house design has been replicated in several countries and featured in various media publications, books, and televisions worldwide. But more than that, her B Corp certified company is committed to making beautiful, sustainable design accessible to people with modest means, providing that quality of living proving, I should say, that quality of living shouldn't be reserved just for the wealthy. I'm sure, very proud to have been the recipient of the Global 100 Most Influential Filipino Women, the Innovator and Thought Leader Award, and has been a featured speaker at Yale University Center for Business and the Environment. She puts, how should I rephrase that? As Vina would put it, she's passionate about helping people design spaces that nourish their soul. Is that right?
Wow, what an introduction. Thank
I
you
did
so
make a
much,
few
Stuart.
notes.
Thank you so much, Stuart. No, that's a very well thought out, comprehensive introduction. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you. You've done a hell of a lot. And so today, what we're hoping to do, Vina, is explore a little bit more about your incredible journey from corporate architecture to conscious living, your time off grid in your tiny house experience, and your vision for making sustainable design accessible to all. So, very warm welcome. You have had such a fascinating life so far, the fascinating background. I know you grew up as one of, I think, 10 children in the Philippines. They moved to LA at around the age of 7. And as I
You've
say, you
been
became
doing
an
your
architect.
homework.
So why don't we start? Could you maybe take us through your journey, and we can maybe find out what initially sparked your interest in sustainable design?
Um, well, I can start maybe when I was a young girl in the Philippines growing up with 9 brothers and sisters, so 10 of
Mhm.
us total, 5 girls and 5 boys. And obviously, in the Philippines with such a large family, we grew up very modestly with parents who didn't have much at all, especially for so many of us. And my dream for my father was to take us to America where it was more opportunities afforded to us. And so
Mhm.
that would be quite an effort to take all 10 children and his wife to the United States.
Absolutely.
And he did that through a series of different years. First, he immigrated here in California in 1971. And then
Mhm.
soon after, my mom, the year after, and then me and my sisters another year, and then my brothers the next year, and my youngest sister the following year. So there was
Mhm.
like a 5-year time frame when we weren't all together.
Uh-huh.
I was 7 years old when I came here to Los Angeles with my mom, my dad, and my sisters. and we lived in a one-bedroom duplex. When my brothers came, there were 12 of us who lived in
Gosh.
one-bedroom duplex, and I slept in the bathtub, I slept in the only closet in the house.
Wherever you could find a space.
Whatever we can find, we all shared
Uh-huh.
our clothing. The
Yeah.
table during dinner was like, you know, trying to
Yeah.
have as much as we
Protect it.
can protected. So I was growing up with that kind of environment, and
Mm,
um, you know, we just had to make do with what we had. And later, I decided to go to architecture school at USC. Um,
mm,
and my thought was always wanting to make a difference in the world. That was just something that I felt even as a little girl. Whatever means it was, I just felt that that was something that resonated with me in my heart, even back
uh-huh.
as a child. And so I was at UCLA as an art major and then transferred to USC for the architecture degree.
Mhm,
And I got the architecture degree, and during my studies, I had seen all these buildings that I wanted to see in person in Europe, all the Gothic churches, all the modern architecture by, well,
mm.
Gaudi, Antonio Gaudi, and I just wanted to see in person, so I wanted to
Yeah.
go to Europe. And so I saved up enough money for a year to travel to Europe for 3 months, and it was like $20 a day with just a pack on my back.
Just backpacking
Mhm. Just
around Europe. Yeah.
backpacking,
Wow.
and
Yeah.
I had never been outside of the United States or to Europe before, didn't know anyone, so it was a big undertaking, but it truly changed my life when I lived there or when I traveled, because not only did I see the architecture, but most importantly, I really learned another culture, many cultures, and their lifestyle and their philosophies about life, and how simple it could be to live very happily. I mean, how easy it is
I
to live
see.
very
Mhm.
simply and very happily. And so it changed my life for 3 months. You know, I absorbed everything. And then I came back to the United States and kind of disillusioned with the profession,
Mhm.
because I saw projects and architecture that were for McMansions and for corporate architecture. And when I came back to the United States, I worked in corporate America in architecture firms for 10 years doing
Uh-huh.
commercial office interiors and had big clients with big budgets. And I knew, you know, later on throughout just eh, learning about sustainability and environment and how detrimental the construction industry is, that
Mm.
we waste, or we our construction waste in the US is 25% within the construction industry. That's just in building. And the carbon dioxide that's created from construction is also about 25%. And the US actually creates more carbon, you know, all of the most of the pollution in the world. Um, and so that just disillusioned me that we were such a culprit. Our industry in architecture was such a culprit to the environmental degradation. And so I
Mhm.
felt like maybe I should get out of the profession.
You
But
went over to Germany, I think, didn't you? Is
yes,
that when you went over to
I did. Gosh,
yeah,
thank you so much, Stuart, for all your research.
that's okay.
So I was working in corporate office. HOK is the biggest, one of the biggest architecture firms throughout the world, and I was working for them. And my
Yeah.
soul just became, you know, I was starving for something more meaningful. So I decided to pursue a fellowship internationally in Germany to research
Mhm.
so affordable and sustainable housing, how to bring those two together. And by then I switched from commercial projects to residential projects because I wanted to be more personal with my clients and have more small scale type of projects that I could have more of an impact on, rather than big office projects that I didn't have a relationship with the actual end user. It would just
Yeah.
be CEO. So in
Uh-huh.
residential architecture, I was still designing, working for offices that had big mansions.
Yeah.
I wanted to do something more meaningful. And so I decided to propose a research project for this fellowship to find out how can sustainable residential projects be affordable. So I went there to Germany. I was based in Cologne for 3 months, and I would travel to Darmstadt and other places in Germany to
Hmm.
interview architects and homeowners to see how, what the budget was, how was the process of, designing and building. And what I found out was the affordability wasn't really reducing the quality of the materials. It was really systemizing the process in which to build and design. And what I found was if you take a prefabricated or standardized method of construction, you can bring the cost down
Hmm.
by just systemizing the process of construction. So they would have prefabricated solutions to details and panelized, construction, like with individual walls and roofs broken down as a constructed unit that just
Hmm.
comes together like Legos so that it's already done in the factory by the time you build it at the site. And
Okay.
so I found that out in my research, and that was my conclusion, was to systemize the process of construction so that it's more efficient, bringing down the cost, but not necessarily the quality of the
Quality. Yeah.
material.
Uh-huh.
And also you can be faster in the construction. So that was one finding. And the other thing was I was living there for 3 months and I actually took German classes
Okay.
so that I learned the language so I can actually speak to the
Speak.
homeowners directly without having to have the architect kind of, have to talk for me. So the
Yeah.
interpretation was hopefully better. But I really learned the culture of the country in Germany
Yes.
was sustainability is not a buzzword, it's not a marketing ploy, it's really the way they lived. They walk everywhere,
Okay.
they take the public transportation, whether or not you're, a little child or you're an elderly grandmother, everyone bikes,
Yeah.
everyone are just so much more fit naturally,
Yeah.
and they don't use cars,
Yeah.
and if they do have cars, they're tiny,
Yeah.
um,
I
and
remember, sorry, I remember the first time I went to the States. It must have been around 1981. So I was about 20. And we were just
which
amazed that
part did you travel all over,
so
or
I've been to mostly around Florida and then over to Texas, Galveston, around there,
wow, okay.
up to New York.
Okay.
Um, but it just amazed me that people didn't walk anywhere. They drove
No,
everywhere. In
they
fact, in
drew
some
in
places,
big
people would
cars,
say, "Oh, you can't walk there. You shouldn't
and you're
go."
like, "It's just across the street."
Yeah, yeah. So that culturally was very, yeah. I noticed that big cultural difference from here in the UK, compared to that.
Yeah,
And then
it
I
was
know, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, it was a start, it was mind-blowing, it
Yeah.
it just opened a whole new world to me.
Yeah. And then I guess in 2013, you took the bold decision to live in your own little tiny house. Want to tell us about that?
Yeah, well, so yeah, 2010, I decided to form my own company, Soul House Design, and it was always
Yeah.
with the mission of doing something affordable and sustainable. And so I wanted to find a way to do that for my own project because most of my clients were just doing big houses, the standard, normal houses, which was fine,
Hmm.
but I wanted a project that resonated with my values. So I tried to figure out how I can create my own project that aligns with those ideas of sustainability and affordability. And I don't want to get a mortgage. I didn't want to get a big loan. So I had to figure out how to either to find an office space that I can renovate without a big loan or building a house. And there was no way of doing it that I can see for like a year. I was meditating on this. And
Hmm.
really, oddly enough, my German, the architect I did a fellowship with, from Darmstadt contacted me because he we kept in touch and he knew that I had the desire to do this project somehow. And he
Hmm.
said, "Well, did you look into tiny houses?" And ironically, he's in Germany and the movement was
Hmm.
in California started by Jay Schaefer, who built his own tiny house on a trailer. He lived in Sonoma. And
Uh-huh.
so I saw his project and thought that's not really my aesthetic because it was, more traditional kind of old style architecture in this
Right.
tiny little footprint. But I looked into it further and realized I can design it, I can build it. At that time, there was no way of permitting it. So it would just be something I would build on a trailer as a temporary structure. And I didn't need to get a loan because it was little enough so I can pay for it as I went. And
Hmm.
so that was a solution that would allow me to build something within my values and my husband, well, boyfriend at the time, was a construction person who knew a lot about building. And he was also a mechanic, so he would be able to engineer the trailer. In 2012, there was no tiny house trailer available. So he had to re engineer the trailer to be able to sustain the weight of a tiny house. And so he rebuilt the trailer and we started building it from the ground up from the trailer up
Hmm.
for a period of a year from 2012 to 2013. And at that time, I was involved in an organization in Ojai called the Ojai Valley Green Coalition. Annually, they have a a greenhouse tour, and they
Hmm.
asked me to have my house as part of the tour in 2013 in October. So that gave me a year to build it. Um, that was nerve-wracking because, thought that everybody was gonna go into the house and take a look at it after
Yeah.
never really building anything and really didn't know how this is gonna end up. But I was able to do it, and it was a very difficult process because I never really built anything. And in my
Mm.
mind, it was never something I was going to show as a business endeavor or something I was going to publicly, you know, announce. It
Sure. You're
was
just
always
going to
a project.
deliver. Yeah.
It was just a personal project that would
Yeah.
allow me to do something that was aligned with my values, and
Yeah.
s suddenly the idea that people were gonna come look at it and judge it, it was just
Mhm.
nerve-wracking.
And
Um,
what were the biggest sort of challenges then in terms of uh, living in that small house, and what were some of the, I guess, the unexpected benefits as
oh
well?
my goodness. I mean, people think that it's a sacrifice to live in such a small space, but they don't really understand all the rewards that come with it. The
Hmm.
money, I mean, easily, without having to spend so much on maintenance and a mortgage and the rent, because you own
Yeah.
it. And the utility bills also because you don't really it was off grid, so I have a propane tank that hooks into my gas stove fireplace.
Hmm.
Um, and I have solar panels that generates the electricity that I need. And
Yeah.
the water is just, hooked up to a spigot with a hose that's with potable water that hooks to the shower, to the sink in the kitchen.
Okay.
So financially, obviously, that's a huge benefit. And it
Massive.
allowed me to save more money so that I could actually buy property because typically in California, it's so expensive to not only, buy property, but actually buy a house with a property. So
Uh-huh.
the money I saved, I was able to buy property in Oakhurst, which never would have been feasible had I not done my tiny house. And maybe the biggest benefit was my my values were now realized in this structure, and then my clients who I never intended to have as a business, this was never for my business, but
Hmm.
now my clients were able to see something that allowed them to see how small a house can be and still be beautiful and expansive and
Hmm.
the rewards that come with it. So now my clients are seeking me to not design bigger houses, but more efficient houses, and not necessarily
Okay.
tiny houses, but just
Yeah.
smaller ADUs and just more efficiency in their home and general, because I definitely don't expect everyone to live in 140 square feet. That's unrealistic. My
Okay.
husband and I couldn't do that. We tried it. It doesn't work.
You'd
So
need one each.
yeah, his and hers. That's definitely one
Yeah.
solution. And then have a connecting deck that
Yeah.
you can share, or another outbuilding that's, a
Yes.
shared space. And that's
Yeah.
actually a very good solution
Mm,
for many reasons, families or couples or
yeah.
groups of friends to come together. So that's another idea of like a
Mm,
community of tiny houses
yeah.
that allows people to live in one parcel of land and share resources, so they're not each buying a washer and dryer and maybe even a car, shared public transportation,
Yeah.
and tools. There's so many
Lots of
benefits
benefits.
to
And
community thing.
and could you tell me a little bit maybe about your experience in terms of regulations? Because I understand that one of the reasons you had to leave your home was because of regulations. Is that right?
That's interesting because for 10 years I lived in Ojai, and I was pretty public about it because people kept on wanting to do articles about my tiny house. And
Hmm.
there was no legal pathway for a tiny house on wheels to be considered a permanent dwelling, because it's a contradiction. The International Residential Code is for permanent based dwellings, structures. It has to be on
Yeah.
the foundation. It has to be fixed. But tiny
Okay.
houses generally are on wheels on the trailer, so they
Yeah.
cannot be considered under the International Residential Code. So back then, it was permitted through, I mean, it was licensed with the DMV, Department of Motor Vehicles, and then you would have a third party like a inspectors coming from another place in the area who would come inspect for certain regulations under DMV or RV code. And so it wasn't as strict as something with the residential code. So we
Hmm.
were always fighting for that because RVs are not 2x4 construction with wood framing and real windows with dual pane. So it was a
Mm.
lesser, not as stringent of a code for an RV versus the residential code. So it didn't really fit under the RV code. So for years, me and several other tiny house pioneers were trying to find a way to regulate them under the IRC. And they came up with Appendix Q, which allowed the construction of a tiny house like a 2x4 wood framing on a trailer. Um, but it's still on a trailer, it's not on a permanent foundation. And so there's actually an effort right now to be able to permanently fix it on the ground without like concrete footings and concrete masonry block
Hmm.
perimeter construction, but
Yeah.
attach it with anchors like a manufactured home, like a mobile home, so that it's easier than doing a it's a permanent foundation, but it's a lot more stable structurally for seismic and wind load, etc., so that it could comply to the IRC. And that effort is going to be made in front of the International Code Council in October at the
Oh,
end of
great.
this month. And so I'm
Uh-huh.
flying out to Cleveland to testify for that. And so we're trying to get a petition out so that we can
Uh-huh.
get as much support as possible to present to the International Code Council. So,
Okay. So where can people find out about that if they wanted to support that?
I have a newsletter. My company Soul House Design puts out a newsletter that talks about that petition, and that's out now, which they basically just sign it. It takes a second to do, and there's a lot of information in the petition for questions and additional details that they can, ask me or find out more from many of the links. Um,
Okay. Will
so
they be able to find that from your website? We'll maybe give everybody your contact details and the site details before we finish.
yeah, absolutely. I can give that
Okay.
detail for the links so people can look to see how we
Fantastic.
can help. That would be great. Thank you.
No, you're welcome. I wanted to ask you about the business and the business name. It looks very international, I guess, to reflect your worldly travels. Is that right?
Yeah,
House, it's spelled Haus, so I guess that's the German influence.
Yes, for my
Uh,
fellowship.
what about the soul?
Soul,
Is that
SOL is a double entendre, so it's about the soul, the spirit.
okay?
Also,
Hmm.
because I traveled to South America for many months, going to Chile, Bolivia, Peru, and basically taking in all the wisdom and building, methods that they had down south. And so that's just speaking to my experience and also my outdoor nature, lover kind of spirit.
Hmm.
I Patagonia, I went to twice,
Well,
and so
very well traveled. So living in California, one of the things that we always see on the news, which is very scary, certainly from afar even, are all the wildfires that you have over there. And I understand that those sort of events led you to focus on uh, aspects of your design, particularly on fire resistance. So how has climate and extreme weather events influenced your designs?
Yeah, so when I lived in Ojai, I was there during the Thomas Fire, when at that time was the biggest fire in California in history.
Wow.
It was not just in Ojai, it was in Ventura and even a lot of erosion and flooding in Santa Barbara, Montecito area as a result of all the fires. So that area, as well as the surrounding areas, is considered a severe high fire hazard zone. So we're mandated to permit our structures with very high fire resistant materials such as metal roofing, and the siding has to be class A rated, such as a
Hmm.
hardy panel with cement board instead of wood, and the
Okay.
decking needs to be not wood but with composite materials that doesn't burn easily. And so those are typically required for most high fire hazard zones, and the majority of the cities and jurisdictions in California are classified under high fire hazard zone. So there's also requirements for defensible space on the exterior of the house, which it doesn't allow you to, unfortunately, have too much landscaping, like trees with overhanging branches above the roof
Hmm.
typically have to be trimmed 3 to 5 feet above the roof so that it doesn't have the potential of burning branches directly on the roof. And one thing really to consider is the fire spread is not really from the ground typically, it's from the air because of the wind
Ah,
that
uh-huh.
happens during the fires. So it's airborne with the embers. And so any venting that happens in the roof, like any attic spaces that requires venting, has openings in like the top of the wall that allows the embers to go in and just have a spark go into the living space, which creates
Mm,
the fire easily, and also on the foundation. So it's not so much as the fire resistant materials, but how much openings in the venting is within your structure. So that's also something to consider. And the roof, the material of the roof is more important than what's at the ground because again, the fire starts from the air onto your roof.
mhm, mhm.
Um, and so they're getting stricter and stricter each year when fires happen in the Pacific Palisades, for instance, and in the Pasadena, Altadena area. I have a couple of projects there. So the defensible space around your house, you can't have as much green landscaping because that's fuel for the fire. So
Okay.
unfortunately, a lot of greenery is
Mm,
it's minimal. Um,
yeah. And so conversely to that, obviously these houses are now all around the world. What about cold climates? I mean, are the houses well insulated? Are they
yeah, I
suitable for
mean,
cold climates?
in the United States, there's Alaska,
Hmm.
and
Yeah,
there's,
pretty cold there.
pretty cold.
Yeah.
So we each have a climate zone, and even
Mhm.
Northern California, ski resorts like Lake
Yeah.
Tahoe. So we have a snow load and insulation requirements for Title 24 energy efficiency. So instead of, let's say, 4-inch walls for insulation, you'd have a minimum of 6 to 10-inch roof and wall sections to allow much higher R value for the insulation. And also, you have to consider thermal bridging in the material of your framing. So if you use metal in the windows and doors or
Hmm.
the framing of the house, it's not as efficient as if you were using wood because metal conducts heat and cold right through. So
Hmm.
it's not as efficient. But we
Okay.
definitely have climate zones that are within the snow area.
Okay.
So we
And
just
are there, sorry, sorry to interrupt. Are any sort of uh, projects or innovations or designs or changes that you're thinking about for the future? Is anything coming down the line?
Yeah, this effort that I'm going through for the International Code Council, that I'm trying to push for this tiny house code,
Hmm.
will allow people to live in their tiny house on wheels, but also permanently anchored to the foundation or to the ground, will allow them to have a permanent dwelling within kind of a trailer chassis. So that allows them to build it more affordably and ability to actually still move it, so that in 5 or 10 years, if their parents, get old and they need to move to take care of them, or if their jobs, you know, need to be relocated, they
Yep.
still have the ability to move. And
Mm.
the flexibility, I think, allows for affordability too, so that you don't necessarily have to buy property, which is a lot
Yeah.
of the money required for ownership of
Yep.
of land and a home. um and so I think the idea of community also is really important for not just affordability but sustainability, because you're really sharing resources instead of
Hmm.
having to spend your money on individual items like a washing machine or tools for
Yep.
gardening or even shared transportation with a car or even a bicycle, and even just sharing the mortgage and
Mm.
a farm or a library. There's so many different benefits that you can
Sure.
have living in a community.
Okay, thank you. I'm just thinking, going back to my introduction, I think I mentioned that you're a featured speaker at the Yale University Center for Business and the Environment. I think I think your presentation was called Bright Lights, Green Sites. Is that right?
Yes, correct.
And that was about social entrepreneurship.
Entrepreneurship and
So what's sort of
sustainability.
and sustainability? So what would be your sort of core messages that you could share with future business leaders about balancing purpose and profit?
Um, So yeah, that presentation was to the business school
Hmm.
with also the environmental school within Yale. And it was speaking to the young, up and coming entrepreneurs. And so it's coming up with a business, I think, that is servicing those two mission of sustainability and affordability. And for me, it didn't come immediately. It was something that was a calling for me to live more simply in a small structure. And the sustainability just automatically, inherently is part of that because you have less of a footprint. And so I think in the mindset of those two things, as long as you're keeping that calling in your heart of trying to figure out a way to achieve those things without having a definite outcome, because I definitely didn't know where I was going to be and I still don't know in the future, but I know
Hmm.
that one thing in the future that I'd like to achieve is something in the realm of community building, because connection, I think, is something that's not really prevalent in our society as much with social media and so much technology. So if you can have more connectivity in person by living together in one parcel and
Hmm.
encounter more one-to-one relationships, I think that in itself would help affordability and sustainability inherently,
Sure.
because
Hmm.
you acquire so much more of a direct relationship connection with other people.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we're coming towards the end of our time, unfortunately. 30 minutes goes so quick.
It
So
does.
I'd just like to ask Vina, for our listeners who might be, certainly are, I'm sure, inspired by your story, and would like to explore more about sustainable living or tiny house design and some of the things that we've talked about today, how can they reach out to you to find out more?
My website is my company name, and as you noted, it's spelled not the most obvious. It's SOLHAUS design.com. So you can definitely reach out to me with that website. There's a contact form, and I can send you a link to the petition for this tiny house code. I can send you my newsletter. You can definitely subscribe to my newsletter on the homepage of my website. And if you'd like to email me, it's my name, Vina, V as in Victory, INA, at soulhousedesign.com. So I look forward to keeping in touch with any of your viewers. I would be happy to connect with
Super,
them.
super. And we'll put those details along with the podcast so people can find them there. They haven't scribbled those down whilst they're listening to us. So, Vina, it's been absolutely fascinating. Your journeys from corporate architecture to living your values in your little tiny house while building a business that makes sustainable design accessible to everyone is truly inspiring. You're proving we can live beautifully and sustainably without compromising on quality or by breaking the bank. So really just want to say thank you so much for giving up your time to share with us today. And to all our listeners, thank you so much for joining us again on the Storer's Edge. Your work's for making a real difference in how we think about sustainable living. And I know our listeners will be inspired by your story. So thank you so much, Vina, for joining us today.
Stuart, it has been a real pleasure, and I'm just so impressed with your information. So
Thank
I
you.
thank you so much for having me on.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
Likewise.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.